Welcome to Purpose Driven Sobriety. Thank you for joining the Purpose Driven Sobriety podcast. My name is Christine, and I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank Sally Payne for sponsoring this episode. Sally is a great friend to us in recovery. And Sally, I just appreciate your support so much. Finally, today as my guest, I have Mr. Pete Sousa. So thank you for coming here to talk to me.
Oh, my pleasure.
By
the way, I'm Pete, an alcoholic.
Hi, Pete.
Yeah,
I've known you for a minute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Inside the rooms of recovery,
yeah.
And I have admired you. See, this goes to show my selfishness and self-centeredness. I've admired you because you're a lot like me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I think I've admired you because you're like me.
There you have it. Well, and I say that in the sense that I lived in shame for so long before I got sober that it was either I just come fully out in the middle stage or I die. I mean, I had to, I haven't practiced anonymity since the day I got sober, the minute I got sober.
Me neither.
I have just been out there because I had to, because I knew if I hid something, I would end up hiding me completely. And so, I've been out there, and so I love that about you. Just because there's still such a stereotype when we talk about alcoholism and addiction and stuff, that seeing someone that's successful, that is articulate and well put together, and they've had this struggle, just gives that person hope. And and you run your own podcast, and you're vocal about recovery. And I just love you so much. But I've never heard your story. So just like with you, we just tell what it was like, what happened, and what we're like now. So I want to hear all the things about you, Pete Sousa.
So, first of all, it is a great honor to be here, to be on this platform with you, and to share this platform with you today.
Amen.
I can relate so much to what you said, because I did have such shame as to who I was, and I'm starting to uncover all that now. That I believe the only way for my only way to heal has been to do it with accountability,
right?
Within the rooms of recovery, and then outside of them too. There's something about going all in with. Yeah, I'm a sober person. Like if I'm having a conversation with you and there's an opportunity where that would come up, it's going to come up.
Isn't it funny? Because I don't meet someone and go, okay, how can I tell them, or how can I? But it's like almost natural now.
It's who I am.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
And I'm not ashamed of it. And there was a point in my life when I was having trouble getting sober, where I became so preoccupied and wrapped around the axle with, who am I going to tell? Mm-hmm. Who am I not going to tell? Mm-hmm. How am I never going to drink again? How am I not going to drink at my son's wedding? Which, by the way, I've never got married and I don't have a son. But
if you did, what would you do?
That's the stuff that keeps us drunk, So I appreciate it. I was talking about a buddy of mine the other day who's having problems with he's just having problems in his family, and the mental wellness is a thing. And he is a sober guy, but, I thought to myself, and I shared it with him, like, I feel like the only way that this person in your life could get well is if they just embrace who they are. And,
right.
And I'm not a doctor, and I can't really tell them that, but maybe I'm out of line telling them that, but that is my experience, right? Like as it goes to sobriety, like I just had to really embrace it and love the aspect of being sober. Mm-hmm. And when I started to love that, like, being an alcoholic and an addict wasn't all that bad. My story, like, to give you some context, was, nobody talked about drinking too much. My mom eventually did. My dad was an alcoholic.
Oh, okay.
Functional, like, as you would say, whatever that is.
I know, right? We always cringe when we hear that word. It's like, were you really?
You do, because there's no such thing as a functional alcoholic.
That's
because
bullshit.
because what do your relationships look like?
Right.
You know what I mean?
What does it look like between your ears?
Mm-hmm.
more importantly.
Honestly, with my dad, we never ended up knowing because he always, he provided, he worked hard. He loved me so much, and he really showed me a lot of grace. I mean, he would get you right back in line. He was like iron fist approach, but he loved the heck out of me. But he was an alcoholic,
Right.
So he was almost like this big toddler, like his emotions would swing one way or the other, whether he was drinking or not.
Right.
And my mom certainly, I think, they got married in, I don't know, 1970, right? Which is like, my mom was an Italian woman from just right outside of Philadelphia. My dad, this guy from Connecticut, and they got together, and it was just like everybody would fall down drunk, I think, in their crowd, and that was the way it was. And I think my mom, she wasn't like a heavy drinker, and I think at some point she was like, wait a minute, what have I got myself into? But she had her own issues, I think, at the time of like self-worth and all that stuff, that she was like, this is what it looks like to be in love, I guess. I don't know. And I think that, she sort of came to by the time my brothers and I were younger, when crazy stuff used to happen with my dad.
So you have two
older brothers.
Two older brothers.
Two older brothers.
And you were raised, where were you raised?
I was raised outside of Philadelphia.
Outside of Philadelphia,
Yeah, so like right in like southeastern Pennsylvania. And that's where we grew up. My dad worked for Amtrak.
Oh, okay.
And so that's why we ended up living there. He worked for Amtrak pretty much our whole life.
Gotcha.
He would just like do like, there would be instances with my oldest brother, like where my dad would pick him up from a dance and would have been drinking. And then he would take, my brother and let's say his date at the time home. And my brother's date would be like, your dad's drunk. And, like that's the kind of stuff. And it would get back to my mom and my dad would have, I'm sure, shame about that, but nobody would ever talk about it.
Well, back then, you didn't. I mean, it wasn't anything. You didn't have to wear your seatbelt. You didn't. I mean, there was such a different world.
And part of it I romanticize about. It's almost like euphoric recall, like my dad driving around with my Uncle Marty, who I love the two of them, but they're both alcoholics. And my Uncle Marty, and they would just drive around with Budweiser cans, like wide open, and they'd already be drunk when they got in the car.
Nuts.
And it was just like the way it was,
Man.
I remember my dad and my Uncle Marty were working on something at my neighbor, Mrs. Schnebley's house, and they were loaded. It's like 4 PM. And my Uncle Marty has a hammer, and he just bashes my dad's hand. And it's just one of those things like, they laughed about forever, but it was like, you look back now and you're like, you guys were wasted.
That was wrong.
Yeah, playing with heavy machinery. So I knew I had this thing early on because my mom would tell me.
Really?
She would just be like, and also too, I was, and I don't sit here like, I'm not one to talk about like people and the medicine they take or what they're prescribed. Sure. But for me, I got prescribed like Adderall or Ritalin when I was a kid. And I can remember taking it, Christine, and I was like, wow, I was like in 3rd grade, and I was like, man, this works. Like,
really?
Feeling like I was on point, like my circle had been rounded out, and then I could.
Well, but that's what that medicine is supposed to do.
Yeah. That's a great point. No, that's a great point. But for me, it was more. But for me, it was more, and that's
There's
true.
There's always a but in our story.
There is a but. Well, and there is a but with a lot of drugs. Like,
yeah, there is.
Like that's okay. Yeah, it did serve a purpose, I guess, and it did make me feel more in tune, but it also made me feel like I was finally able to operate with everybody else. Like, okay, there was something wrong with me, and now I took something, and now there's nothing wrong with me.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I can see how that could start early programming there.
Really?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, or enforced programming, which was already naturally genetically installed, just kind of activate it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I believe. I believe that it was already installed, and something like that activates it. And then I remember too when I was in, and you've probably heard me say this in meetings, but when I was in 8th grade, I would go to the dances, and I was so scared to talk to girls. And when I was in 9th grade, we started to drink, and I couldn't wait to get there.
Wow.
And it was like, I have this finally.
Right.
I have this thing.
Ease and comfort with being with other people.
That was I mean, and I grew up Catholic, going to church, great relationship with, people in the church. But my first spiritual experience was drinking, 6 or 7 Miller Lights with my friends at a park in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, and being like,
wow,
oof, I can't believe this. And the first...
I'm finally myself. I'm finally comfortable.
And you know what I was doing? I started lying about stuff. When I was drinking, like right away, I'm telling tall tales, and
Trying to keep up with them.
yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so throughout high school, I was always around the alcohol. And you notice, I've heard somebody tell their story once when I started to drink on like weekends, and then all of a sudden it became my focal point of the entire middle of the week. Where are we going to drink next weekend? Like
Planning.
Whose house, who's going to get the beer. I was so obsessed
And there
with
was
this.
almost an ease and comfort found by even the planning of it.
Yeah.
Kind of like when a doctor starts writing that script, and all of a sudden you feel actually a little bit better just by them writing it out. It's strange how that works.
That's a great example of how really screwed up the programming is.
Right.
You mentioned the programming like that. Yeah, that makes you feel good. You haven't taken anything or anything,
your
but
shoulders start to drop, and I get it.
And so the planning was a big part of the addiction. And I think I was an athlete in high school, and I was. I loved just sports. I just love sports, and I love playing sports. That was my first love, like a natural love. And there was a little bit of substance to this, but coming home from church, we would get Dunkin' Donuts, and I would sit in front of the television, probably like sixth grade, with like the Philadelphia Inquirer, with all the football games and all like the notes on the games and the betting lines, and I would put on NFL Today with Brent Musburger and Jimmy the Greek, and that was one of my first highs. Like, this is the best ever. Like, I got sports, I have Dunkin' Donuts, I have this.
What else?
This TV. It was a great, little kid.
That's
It was
awesome.
the greatest. But once I started to drink, all that stuff. I still love sports and paid attention to it, but I had a brand new passion.
Took that seat. Yeah.
And it was alcohol, and ego came with that. I really think my ego was taken into. I really didn't. I don't know what I was before I started to drink, but once I started to drink, I thought I was something important, or I had to keep up this. Whatever.
Now, was your dad still drinking during that time?
Oh yeah, he stopped drinking. But the thing about my dad is he was so dry when he would stop drinking. He stopped drinking for like a year, but I couldn't tell because he was still a nut.
Yeah.
He was still, nothing changed.
Right.
And then my mom always says that our friend, Mr. Pulliam, Dr. Pulliam, he was a dentist, said to my dad, you were a lot more fun when you were drinking. And then my dad just started to drink again. Because my dad was like a fun guy amongst like
Well,
crowds.
and you get a dry drunk, and you're, most of the time, at least in that situation, you're like, please. have a drink. Just please have a drink.
Yes.
So you can be, more tolerable.
100%. So,
Man.
100%. So, yeah, he drinks. Both my brothers were drinking all the time. And I knew once I got into high school, like that I was like, something's wrong with me, but I don't care. Or not even something's wrong with me, just like, in the back of my mind, I thought I like this way too much.
Right.
So but it was, I don't know why anybody wouldn't do it. I was able to talk to girls, which was a huge part of my drinking. I was always insecure and scared to talk to females. Looking back, like I never had any sisters. I just had my mom who would like dote on me.
Right.
I didn't have any friends that were girls or any interaction with women until I finally started to establish some friends in high school. But I just didn't know how to talk to the opposite sex. It was like a whole. It was like aliens have come down to Earth, and now you have to communicate with them. And it was more just fear.
Right. Sure.
So, alcohol was a huge part of that. It was a huge part of the courage I would get up to talk to girls. So, but I had my first big time consequence. I started to evolve into an athlete. I never was as good as I wanted to be, but good enough where I got a scholarship to play football at the University of Richmond.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, well, it was awesome. So I get this scholarship, and I go to play in this all-star game in the city of Philadelphia, like the spring of my senior year. And this doctor is like, because they wanted to clear you, just give you physicals,
Sure.
And this doctor's like, hey, like, something's wrong. Your heart is beating funny. Like, let's get it checked out before we can clear you to play in this game. This is spring of 1995, almost summer, my senior year. And I go to a cardiologist, and he looks at it. He's like, you have cardiomyopathy. It's viral cardiomyopathy. Like, you probably won't ever play football again.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And he said it could have been caused two ways. It could have been caused by you could have had a virus that went through your body, and when the virus went away, it had hung around for so long. Really, your body is so used to fighting the virus. When it goes away, your body will attack your organs, right? Like,
oh wow,
which
that's nuts.
Or you can get it from alcohol and drugs.
Oh,
Yeah. And I remember this is my first real hardcore alcoholic moment at 18 years old. I was like, okay, it had to be the virus.
Damn that virus.
Yeah, right? Like,
yes.
I was right away. And I'm sure a cardiologist could be listening to this and think, well, there's maybe I'm not putting it exactly right, but that sure is how I heard it.
Right.
And there was no way anybody was going to get between me and this liquid, alcohol. This alcohol, it was everything to me. And during my senior year, I had started my mom, I mentioned, was not an addict. So I got into her medicine cabinet. Oh my God, it was like hitting gold for somebody who likes to change the way they feel. She had all the prescriptions she hadn't finished were just sitting there. You know, all those things from surgeries, from going to the dentist. So I'm taking this stuff going into high school as a senior, like flying high into high school. Now I'm still drinking, but I'm onto this stuff thinking, well, this is even better than alcohol because nobody knows.
Right. You can't smell it on you.
No.
You can't,
and I'm a silly guy. So, I mean, and really, honestly, nobody did know unless my friends knew because I started to tell them.
Because you'd acted a little bit different or, yeah.
And so, but I think that all this was the perfect storm leading to this heart problem. So I go to college. The University of Richmond keeps me on scholarship.
Really?
Coach Jim Reed, still my man to this day, he was like, we walked into your house and offered you a full scholarship. I talked to your parents, like, you're coming to Richmond. And, you know, there was like a small chance I was going to be able to play again. Of course, I would have had to stop drinking.
Of course.
And give my heart a chance to get better. So
right.
that was off the table. Again, like a total maniac, I'm thinking, well, I still do want to play again. So I remember I did stop. I never took any pills or anything, but I still drank and just smoked marijuana so much. And I never got better. And like my heart never got better so I could play. And I looked back.
That had to be heartbreaking for you, like a fish out of water.
And really, I dove into an identity of somebody who drank and did drugs.
Well, because you had such an identity you were walking into. I can't imagine how that must have felt. You know, regardless of how good you were good enough to get a scholarship. Yeah. So that had, I mean, yeah, right. And so when that is, when you hit a wall on that, it's like pivot and what's left. Man, I can see that.
And I still haven't totally like processed that because it was a dream of mine. You know, as bad as you are, or as good as you are, or whatever. You know, plenty of guys went to Richmond and went to play in the NFL. And so I'm thinking, like, I can play in the NFL. It's just a dream. It's a dream you've always had.
Right.
And so right away, that's gone. And I never really – of course, you don't process anything when you're drinking that much. So I right when I got to college, I became – and then all of a sudden you realize how much you can drink without, like, parents around and stuff. And in college, you can certainly find people who are going to be like-minded like that. And I almost used it to my advantage in a sense where, oh, look at me. Like, I'm still involved with the football team. Those guys are like me, and I'm friends with them. And now I'm friends with all the stoners. And, you know, I'm friends with all other guys that take drugs. I'm friends with everybody, you know. And but really it was just one crowd to the next, just kind of changing who I was. I mean, I did develop really good friends on the football team and some friends that weren't on the team. But quickly, those good friends came to realize, like, I started to, like drinking way too much. And I was smoking weed all the time. But I found a way. I did get through college. You know, the second semester of my, I guess, junior year, this was another, like, regular thing that would happen to me. You know, I was under investigation for selling marijuana. We weren't even selling marijuana, but we were smoking so much that they figured. We went to East Carolina and came back to school with a bunch of pot, and word had gotten around, and the campus police were like all over, like, you're selling marijuana, you're gonna, you know, we're gonna put you undercover. I was like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, but I had a 6-month period of my college experience, which every day I was worried I was gonna get thrown out or arrested or I didn't know what, you know, but it's like, that's the baggage that alcohol and drugs brings with it, you know? And there were all these broken relationships, right? Like, I don't know. I had no clue what it was like to have a relationship with a woman because I was always so drunk or drunk enough because I figured I needed the courage to do this. So I had no real relationships with women. All the relationships I mean, and honestly, football was one of the best things that ever happened to me because that was, I mean, I bonded with those guys like where it was deeper than
Right.
the drinking buddy stuff, which
that's
was
great.
is cool, and they're still some of my best friends today. Even though I didn't play, I was so dyed in the wool with that situation. But I got out of college, and I made enough connections and friends that ultimately I ended up getting a job in New York. A friend of mine who had gone to Richmond, like me, played football. He got hurt, and he was involved with like football writing and stuff out of college. So I got a job with him, moved to New York City, and then I was really like school was out. I mean,
wow.
and it's like anything I tell people. I moved up there. We started working for a football agent and for a football writing company. It was my dream come true. And I showed up, for the first like six months, I was awesome, and that's what I always tell people as part of my story, right? Like as an alcoholic or a drug addict, like I could go anywhere. And for the first like 6 hours, 6 months, 6 days, whether it was, you were giving me a job or you were inviting me to your shore house or you were lending me your car, it'd be good for a little.
Right.
And then sooner or later I was going to crash the car. I was going to steal something from your house.
Do something to embarrass myself or you.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
were going to want to fire me from your job. I mean, that was, I always, just the alcoholic was going to show up at some point in its real ugly form, and that's what happened with this job. I discovered I love doing drugs too. I love specifically cocaine because it could help me stay awake and drink more. And I think that, in my family, we struggled with that. We had that something in our brain, my brothers and I, we all liked that drug. It was just whatever. And it was, I would never ever recommend anybody do any hard drugs ever. But what that did was it expedited it hastened my bottom,
Really?
Oh yeah, because, I watched my dad drink, quote unquote, functionally forever. But the moment I started to do that drug, there was no way I could keep up. I was going to die or I was going to quit, really. But along this whole ride, I tried to get sober in 2002 because I got a DUI, but it was like I had a back problem, people say. I had people on my back, right? So let me go here. So everything I had, that job, friends, I had all that, those relationships had deteriorated. I was the person who had been gift wrapped this great life, and it was all gone. Born on third base, thought I hit a triple. Like that was my ego in my life. I was so entitled, and now I did have the gift of desperation almost, in 2002. I went to my first meeting, and I was in bad shape. And
Now, is this still up in New York?
no, now I'm back in Philadelphia
Okay,
because
got
I had
it.
to move home.
Oh.
Right? Yeah. So I'm back home, right?
That's a little bit of a fall.
I'm back home.
Yeah.
And everybody knows, like, the jig is up. I'm the last one to know. My buddy Scott, who's a really great guy, has been part of my recovery for even back since 2002. When you're an alcoholic, you're usually the last one to know.
Yeah,
You know?
right?
You're
Isn't
the
that
last one to
amazing
know.
how that works?
That's what happened with me,
And you
and
can
I've
just
heard your
look back
story.
and just go, what the? Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah, so I started to go to meetings, and my life started to change. And I went to meetings for 90 days, and I was 27 at the time, I think, 25, no, probably 24, 25, and I don't ever want to say I wasn't ready as an excuse for somebody else to say you aren't ready, right? Because I think the moment people set foot in an AA room, they have found home.
Right. So, yeah, something in them is somewhat ready, but yeah.
Yeah, but I was at a party and people were passing around weed, and I was like, well, I'll smoke weed and I won't drink. And for a while, that was fine. But like the moment that that part of my brain gets activated, I've experienced at some point it's alcohol is going to break through.
Yeah, see, that makes me nuts when people when someone will come in the room and they'll say they're sober but they still smoke weed, and it's like, okay.
It's just not my deal.
It shouldn't be. It's my humble opinion. It shouldn't be anybody's deal. Mind altering is mind altering is mind altering.
Yeah.
You know, oxy, heroin, weed. When you go to change your state of mind, that's not ever going to be a good thing ultimately.
I can't. When that comes up, you know, I can't sponsor you. You certainly can't be my sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, if we're going to be real, like, there's going to be a breakdown in our real abilities to talk about sobriety. You're just not going to be able to go where I want to go.
It's like being kind of pregnant. You're either sober, clean sober, same damn thing. You're either that or you're not.
Yeah, and I've been lucky enough that I'm surrounded by people like you, which are like, you know, I talk to a guy every morning, my buddy Murph, and, you know, you could say we're sort of hardcore alcoholics, and I'm less vocal about that side of it than he is, but he's like, dude, like, we talk about what you're talking about. He's like, you're not fucking sober.
No,
like that's it.
You're just not.
Over.
That's right.
Yeah.
So and you're right. If someone were to ask me to sponsor them and they're in that type of behavior, no, because you're right. I can't be real with you.
No, I mean,
because I never know if you're going to be in your proper mind or not.
Well, yeah, like if I go over your house in the middle of the day
That's
and you're
enabling.
smoking weed or something, it's like, that's just not in my program. Like, as a sober person, I don't want to go. Even if you're not an addict, like, I'm not crazy about being around anybody smoking weed in front. You know what I mean? So that's a whole thing so I was very wrong when I thought I could do that and stay sober. And I got a job in Colorado, and the moment the plane touched down, I was away from all of my support system. I started to drink again. And then it was like, I mean, the moment I drank, I went looking for hard drugs. Like, you know, it was like, so now I'm in that place. Not only am I going back to drinking, the moment I'm drunk, I'm like, I've heard Rob Lowe describe it, a sober guy, as like French fries and ketchup. Like, if I was going to drink, I needed to get drugs too. You know what I mean? That was just the way my brain worked. And it wasn't like, you know, I didn't, just like being an addict, I didn't want that to be like what I thought, but I didn't even have any space to think about it. It was like literally like a dog, like drunk, drugs. What's next? You know what I mean? Like,
well, and did it make your mind stagger when you realized, you know, because a lot of people have this this perception that once you stop and you're clean or sober for a little period of time and you start back, that you just kind of start over, right? you just start over, have one drink, and you know, the history of ever, at least that I've seen, is in a very short time you are exactly where you left off when whatever happened to make you stop for that brief period of time.
And what you're 1,000%
if
right.
not worse.
And you are so committed to this lie that, so the first night I drank, I remember I ran out looking for drugs, got some. I remember my buddy Joe, who knew that I had a problem, was like, he found me doing the drugs, and you know, he was a young guy. He didn't know. He's like, you got to learn to walk before you can run. He like took him away. You know, I don't know.
You're doing it wrong.
Yeah, and I was just like, okay, whatever. You know, either way, he was right in one form or another. But I can remember the night after that episode where I went looking for drugs. I went to Chili's with a couple of my friends, and I had 3 beers, and I was laughing. And I went home and I didn't drink anymore. And so now I was okay. I'm okay.
Well, that's pretty normal.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Hey.
Yeah, like so you hang on to that Chili's night for the rest of your life.
Right. There was a time.
Yeah. So and that'll keep you drunk for the rest of your life, really. So, but I started drinking again, and I give my parents such credit. My dad, you know, I told them, because I was such an alcoholic when I started to go to meetings in 2002. I'd become such a wreck that I can remember. Now I'm sitting in front of you. I look okay, right? I look normal. I have a job, and I'm home for Christmas, and I make this like I'm going to start to drink again, just so you guys know. Like, AA is not for me. And I remember my dad was like, just sitting there. He's like, you're going to go down the drain again. I remember that.
No.
Yeah. And my mom, you know, just being like, I remember everybody was so disappointed. Just disappointed is the word. And it didn't matter. I was, you know, I was going to do what I was going to do. And I went back out there and put together a solid 9 years of just hardcore drinking and using, and, you know, jobs, big or small, I would always kind of blow them up. I worked in the NBA for a while. I did public relations. And I thought, that enabled me to earn I was entitled to party all the time with that. I was going to party anyways, right? But I thought that now you certainly couldn't give me any crap about my partying because I have a job.
It comes
and
with the
it's a good
territory.
job. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the drugs are the same deal. And, just to kind of get through to like the drinking and drugging side of it, there were so many major consequences, right? I mean, just like the stuff was crazy. Like I got a buddy who now he's a head coach of Albany's basketball team, but he and I were living together in Philadelphia. And I reconnected with this girl from college who liked to party like I like to party. And wonderful woman. We really connected, and she's not even an addict. She was just kind of going through a phase. But we start to party. She moves in. This is like typical alcoholic behavior. I'm living with this guy, Dwayne, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, Dwayne, like Wendy's coming over. And now Wendy moves in,
Oh, okay.
in a stretch of 10 days. And Wendy and I are up every night doing whatever all night. Dwayne is like a normal man getting up, going to coach the Temple basketball team. And he's like, what in the world do I have here? And that was there was a million stories like that. Mm-hmm. And I finally get to the end of my rope, and I lose every job I had. It's 2011. It's the fall, and I'm trying to go to AA again, right?
Still in Colorado?
No, now I'm back. So I went from Colorado. I bounced all over the place. Wherever you go, there you are.
Yes.
Yeah. I went from literally, I went from Colorado to Charlotte to Philadelphia, working professionally, then back to Charlotte, and then ended up back in Philly at rock bottom again. Right. That was my parents' house. Was always
base.
Yeah. I mean, and that is entitlement too. I should have been homeless. Mm-hmm. And I kind of was, in a sense. Like I would go couch surf and stuff, and it was just pathetic. So I was like, I'm going to go to meetings. And this is where the story gets awesome. Well, not quite yet. I'm going to meetings, but I can't stop drinking. So I'm just lying to people, right? I'm going to a meeting at 7 a.m. in the morning. I'm drunk by 10 a.m. Or if I'm at a meeting at 5, I'm probably already drunk or taking something. Finally, the magic happens when I asked this guy, Matt, to be my temporary sponsor because I just can't stop drinking, and I need to tell people I have a sponsor anyways. So Matt is like, all right, I'll be your sponsor. And now I'm in Philadelphia. He said, I'll pick you up tonight and we'll go to a meeting. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay. He picked me up. He's like, we're not going to go to a meeting. We're going to go to dinner. And I remember thinking ugh, I have to now sit, I'm sitting across from you.
Right.
Right. If I was drunk or on drugs, you'd probably pick it up, especially if the topic of our dinner was around drinking and drugs. So now I'm drunk. I'm taking some drugs, and I got to sit across from this guy. And he's telling me his story. He's just telling me his story, and he's like, he gets done. And he'd only been sober for a year. And he's like, you should go to rehab. And I remember thinking okay.
Really?
It was now you can't see it, but Christine and I are sitting next to a window here at the Rogue Media Studios at the Alco building. And it was like the window opened up. God opened up the window, the last window for me, just a tiny bit. And I just rolled through and fell on the other side. And that moment changed my entire life. I went home. I told my parents, who I'm living with in my early 30s, hands on my hips, I've got an idea. I need to go to rehab. And they're like, thank God, dude.
Wow.
So of course, in true alcoholic fashion, I'm like, give me a week, And
of course, I got to get ready.
Yeah. So
get my affairs in order.
Yeah, I have no affairs.
No, right?
My affairs in order is my favorite line of all time.
I know.
I'm happy you
I
said
did
that.
the same one.
I have to get my affairs in order. Yeah. So I left a message on my voicemail. I had no job, nothing going. And I said that I was out of the country on assignment for a month. When I went to rehab, so people would, not think I was
have no
rehab.
idea. Yep.
Yeah, everybody knew. So I go to rehab, and everything changed for me. And again, I've seen AA work for people right away. You go to meetings. I mean, my brother Kevin, my brother Michael, my friend Murph. I get to tell you people in my life. My brother Kevin just passed away, and we'll talk about that. But he was a guy who went to meetings and got it. And he actually went to treatment and didn't get it, which shows like, when he finally,
Same thing here, yeah.
When he was ready, when you're ready, there's nothing anybody can tell you wrong.
Right.
And when you're not ready, nobody can tell you anything
Exactly.
right. And for whatever reason, when that guy said that to me, I was ready. And I went to treatment, and I just bought in. Like like all that stuff. I mean, you have this problem where you're killing yourself, and you have no life. Your life is like as small as like, the tip of your thumb, right? But you're guarding that small life. Everybody else has their hand out like, hey, like, let us help you. Like, we want to help you. And you're like, no, you're protecting this nightmare. And it's what you're accustomed to doing. Like, it makes zero sense. But when you're sick, you don't know.
Right.
And so you get to treatment or you embrace recovery, however way you do it. And I really did. I was off the debate squad. You got a higher power for me? Let's go. And if I'm struggling with my connection with God, well, I know that I've been to AA meetings where there's an incredible energy in there. And that energy is for sure bigger than me. And those people in those rooms, they crawled in there just like me.
Right.
But now I look at them and they're like these vibrant people.
They're
with like,
laughing.
They're laughing.
What the hell?
Larger than life personalities without drinking. Like happy, having fun, like you said. And I believed in that. Like I believed in them. And I never had an issue with God because I was Catholic and, going to church was a pain in the ass because I would have rather been getting an early start on watching football or something. But at the end of the day, like, I loved God. I never was like, oh, whatever.
So you did have a somewhat of a foundation at least.
I certainly did, yeah.
You didn't maybe have that relationship.
Yeah, my mom always worked at Villanova University, a Catholic school, Augustinians, priests and brothers, always all around, awesome dudes. So I got to know these guys, and there was a touchstone for me. I had a good relationship with God. I was an altar boy, and I don't have any of those. Like, I know there was awful stuff that happened, but I don't have any of that, So I can tell you that it was not that hard for me to click back into that. One, because I had that foundation, but forget even having that foundation. I was desperate.
Right.
So it's like, what do you got for me? And I started to follow directions a bit. One first big thing that happened for me in recovery that was a big turning point was I was dating a girl at the time. She was not good news. I wasn't good news when I went to treatment. This girl was not good news. She was sick like me. And she came to the rehab where I went, and she was looking through her phone, and a picture came up or a text message from a guy. I was like, well, who's the guy? Let me see the phone. I'm 14 days sober, and now I'm retreating back into the guy I was before I came in. And I remember I'm sitting in a chapel at the place I went to rehab, Karen, great place, and very spiritually faith-based, but it's, if you need to get sober, go there. And I just remember thinking probably asking God for strength and then being hey, saying to her I'd like you to leave. It's just this isn't
Wow.
And wouldn't you believe, she got up and she left. I mean, it was a bit of a thing for a second. I remember I was talking to my buddy Chris. He's like, is your girlfriend, does she have the dark hair? I was like, yeah. He's like, she's coming back up this hill. I was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
But she left, and I was my first experience with an esteemable act.
Doing the right thing in the moment. For you.
Yeah. And it felt awesome.
Wow.
Every time before that, I had always had to drink or take something or do something for as far back as I could remember. If there was a guy who I knew I had to fight, I was going to get drunk first before I was going to try to kick his ass. If there was a girl that I wanted to date, I was going to get drunk first before I could take her out.
Right.
I mean, that was the story of my life. So, and it was all, you're just driven by 100 forms of fear. And so I got finished treatment, my 30 days were up, and another one of my first walking through a huge door with God was they told me I needed to go somewhere else. You're not ready to go home, dude. You don't have a job, you really don't have a place to live, you have no money, there's a recovery house you should go to that we can set you up in. And I was like, okay, I'll go. I fought it for a little bit, and then I was like, all right, I'll go. So now all of a sudden well, you're a grown man, right? When you're 18, but I'm now 33 or 32, and I'm living in this halfway house with like, it might as well have been 50 other guys. It was probably 10, but it seemed like guys were, I opened up my top drawer in my room that I shared with 2 other dudes when I got there, and there was a dried out bowl of SpaghettiOs in the top drawer.
wow.
I remember thinking, shit, man.
This is where I've landed. Did it feel like punishment?
No, it felt like part of the process.
Okay.
It truly did, because
Okay.
at that point I had bought into like recovery, and I wanted to be sober. So it felt like this was.
You're willing to do what was
I was willing to
suggested.
go to any lengths.
Gotcha.
The first night I kind of pitched a fit where I tried to get out of there. Like I was like, I remember I'm trying to go to bed, and this guy pops up and he starts smoking cigarettes in the room, like almost smoking in his sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy below me is snoring like a chainsaw. And I remember being like, I don't know about this. You're at rehab. You're in a nice room with like everything.
And you're sober,
Yes.
which means every nerve in your body has been frayed.
Yes, and you're not. You're exactly. You're like a live wire.
Not your complete best self, but
Yeah,
yes,
no.
you're sober.
Yes, and so
Yeah.
I was like, I got to get out of here. We couldn't use the internet or computers, but there was a work resource center we could go to in the town of Bel Air, Maryland, where we were outside of Baltimore. So I was like using this resource center to send out emails to whatever, like you're not supposed to do. And I remember the subject heading on my Hotmail at the time was, I got to get out of here. And it was an email to my brother, like a Hail Mary, like, you got to get me out of here. And this woman was
Come
like,
break me out.
This woman was like, you had to be looking for a job. And they're like, excuse me, sir, you're going to have to leave. I was like, okay. Because, she saw that I was writing a personal email.
Busted.
So that was a moment where, I probably another turning point. I ended up, another big moment for me in that halfway house was like, you had to get a job to live there, Christine. Like, they were going to kick you out unless you got a job. And everybody's working at like McDonald's or Starbucks. I remember one guy had a job at the mall at Hollister. Mm-hmm. And you would have thought he was like the host of The Tonight Show. It was like the greatest job ever. Marwan works at Hollister. Like, oh my God. So I went to Hollister. I couldn't get the job there. I couldn't get a job at Dick's Sports. I couldn't get a job. There was a job I tried to get. There was a guy that looked like the Statue of Liberty. He dressed up like the Statue of Liberty on the side of the road. This place called Liberty Tax.
Taxes, yep.
And I was like, hey, can I get a job there? And this guy was like, no, like, we got it. We're good. We got guys. And I was like, okay. I remember I was leaving. It was like 40 degrees in Maryland in January. He's like, you can come back in a week. He's like, they usually quit, the Statue of Liberty guys. So at that moment, and this is the way I remember it, I walked out of there and I saw this Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I was like, I'm going to go. I'm getting a job there. Almost like the addict thing. Like, I'm going to fuck them. I'm going to get a job here.
Right.
Because the people at the halfway house were like, you have to work. And I was like, I've worked in the NBA. I'm not getting a job at
Kentucky
7-Eleven.
Fried Chicken.
Yeah, but guess what? So I go to Kentucky Fried Chicken. God sends me to Kentucky Fried Chicken. I believe this is like a spiritual journey. I sit in front of this woman. Her name is Sharika. And I'm doing my interview because I got a call back to KFC, So they call me. I'm good. I got an interview. So Sharika's like, why are you in town? Why do you live here? And I told her some bullshit like, I'm here for family. And she gave me the job. And it turns out she was a graduate of a recovery house living in Maryland.
Really?
She knew,
Wow.
hey, this guy just needs an opportunity.
He's not to the point of you can tell me. Yeah. Wow.
But let's give him a chance. And she gave me a job. And so now I'm working at Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I might as well have been flying a plane. Like I was scared to death. The register was like, I don't know what to do. Like, people would come up and order stuff, and I would be like, Sharika, can you help me out? And there'd be long lines, and I wouldn't know. I wasn't sure about the register. I'd be like, I gotta go to the bathroom. They'd be like, dude, you got 15 people here. Like, get back in, take care of it. Like the fight or flight is coming in. And that job was so important for me to just, first of all, to learn how to do something sober. I mean, I learned how to work the register. I learned how to work the drive-through. I could make the sandwiches.
You learned you were capable.
Totally. And it was
of whatever it may be, just that I'm capable.
And it really helped my self-esteem, like to the point where, and I remember at the end of my tenure there at KFC, people are assholes to people that work in fast food.
Oh, sure.
And I started to get a kick out of it later on. And so this guy was going through the drive-through, and I have the headset on and everything. I've told the story a million times, but it's worth telling again. And this guy is like, he's like, hey, where's everybody? What's going on? You know, like, because the line's long and we're not at the window. And
Sure.
I have the headset on. I'm at like a different part of the KFC. Now I'm like running shit. You know, I'm like, I'm sorry, sir. One of the chickens is loose in the back. And the guy's like, you got chickens back there? Live chickens? I'm like, no. I was like, sir, I'll be with you in 1 second. So now I'm having fun and I'm laughing. And everything just started to change. After this experience, and this is what I tell people too, like, I get a little freaked out sometimes. I still do. When people are like, hey, tell me your story. Like somebody that, let's say a businessman that comes into the rooms and he's got a house and a wife and money and he's got stuff. He's like, how did you do it? I'm like, buckle up. Like, this is my story. I'm not saying that this is how you have to do it, but, you know, my story was rehab, halfway house. I lived with another sober guy in Jersey City, New Jersey for close to a year. Or maybe a year and a half. So we're talking almost 2 years of like, you know, heavy duty recovery. Like, I wasn't ready to be around anybody drinking. I really took my time, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me because, you know, now there's no place I can't go. Now there's really, I mean, as long as I have singleness of purpose, you know,
Sure.
I can be where I need to be or want to be. You know, when they move the tables out of the way and people are set to start dancing, I'm ready to go home. You know, I'm just not, I don't stay up that late, period. I don't stay up past 9 o'clock if it's up to me, really. But I can go where I'm intended to go and where I have a purpose. But, you know, there was a time where my purpose was to be at the crib talking to another alcoholic all night, you know, and I'm still going to end up talking to an alcoholic for a long portion of the day, early in the morning or late at night. But I can do all the stuff now that I used to get drunk to do, whether it's talk to women, stand up to somebody, you know, the things we were talking about, to achieve things that involve taking risks, good, healthy things, you know, like I can do all this now. When I got sober, I started to, and like you did, I owned it right away. So like if you met me and I hadn't talked to you in a year, I was going to say, hey, like I'm sober now. If there was an amends to make and it was the right time, I would say, hey, here's the deal. Here's where I'm at. You know, I when I lived in Jersey City, my sponsor, Mike, and I, we would go through, you know, the book in 12 Steps in AA, I've said we use, you know, and I would read it with him every Wednesday night at his place on Washington Street in Hoboken. And it was like a moving experience for me. I mean, I remember getting the feeling that I used to get from alcohol and drugs out of what is going on with me and this guy. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I would leave his apartment. I'd be like sky high from being vulnerable with another guy, telling him exactly what was going on with me finally. And being able to, I guess, just relate, you know?
Just being authentic.
Yeah, without anything else.
Yeah.
Because that's not authentic, taking something to do something, right? But yeah, and I started to get back into working in sports. My passion was always to call games, to be a play-by-play guy as a kid. And I ended up making amends to people that I'd worked for in the past in working in sports where I was back on that path. And I was calling games and I was living in a hotel in Massachusetts, going to meetings all the time, just throwing everything I had into this purpose. Opportunities came and they went, right? That's sobriety. It's not all unicorns and rainbows, you know? And ultimately, you know, I remember, you know, I ended up started working in TV news, and I tell this story because it's kind of like the KFC. I had gotten a job in TV news on account of the fact that I was kind of good talking live, right? But when I started to do TV news, they would put a camera or they would put a teleprompter in front of you and you had to read. Well, I'm dyslexic. That was horrifying for me.
Wow.
So I started to do this job, and I was terrible at it. And I'm failing, like, out loud. Now, I'm in Northeast Louisiana. It's not like I'm on NBC News every night.
Sure.
But might as well, if it's 15 people, it might as well be 15
It's
million.
enough, right.
And I'm struggling to read, but I'm, like, so dialed in and believing in my ability to go through stuff and overcome it. I'm like, I'll get this. And I did. You know, and then I ended up doing that for about a year, and, you know, God, really, my journey took me to Waco. And the first thing I did when I moved in, I was here, you know, we're in downtown Waco. I was over at 4th Street. My mom helped me move. And I went to the group that you and I go to. You know, I went to that. It was like, you know, I was like, I'm going to go to a meeting, and that was 7 years ago, and that's been my home group ever since. You know, and all great stuff has happened in my life. Like, but again, ups and downs. You know, this year, you know, my brother died. He was like a hero of mine. He's the reason I'm sitting here. I was not sure if I should start a podcast, and he was like, you got to do. He was an advocate for what you and I advocate for. You know, recovering out loud. He was like, we need people out there sharing their story. And he was an AA guy. He's like, I'm not saying like break traditions. I'm just saying carry your message.
Sure.
You know, carry the message.
Be you.
Be you. Because people like you, Christine, are why I got sober. Because when I was, and that's why I wanted to do this podcast, when I was sitting in my parents' house and they were away, and I drank all their liquor, and I'd now wake up in the morning and had the shakes. This is like the last year of my drinking. I can remember watching documentaries about people who had gotten sober and just crying, like I was a shell of a person. I was like, I'm never going to be able to do that. But at the same time, watching it and wanting that so badly. And those voices that were out there for me to see, celebrities or whoever, notable people, I was like, they can do it. Chris Mullin can do it. The basketball player, I can do it. Dennis Eckersley can do it. I can do it. And it's funny, I brought up Chris Mullin. I was 2 years sober. I was getting back into my career, which was, you know, now I'm doing broadcasting, but I'm working in pro basketball. And I was at the NBA Summer League in Las Vegas. I've been there for like 2 weeks. And I got to like 2 meetings. And I was like this, you know, got clenched fists. And so I'm interviewing this guy, Chris Mullin, who's an NBA Hall of Famer, but I knew he was sober. He was out there with his sobriety. He'd been sober for many years. And the interview was over, and then I just said, like, hey, man, I'm a year and a half sober. Like, I was like, I'm kind of struggling. And he lit up like a Christmas tree. He was
Really?
He's like, have you got any meetings here? I'm like, I've been to like one. He's like, oh, come on. He pulls out his phone. He's like, you know, there's a meeting at Harrah's. There's a good one there. He's looking through.
Wow, that's amazing.
He's like, you know, and we were talking about it. I just remember he looked at me and I was telling him my program, and he could tell I was doing whatever it took. He's like, just keep
and
doing
all
what
of a
you're
sudden,
doing.
isn't it amazing? Because all of a sudden, there is a connection there that nothing else on the planet could compare to that connect. That is a soul recognizing a soul, and there's nothing like it.
And no,
it's crazy.
And it was the wind in my sails that I needed for that day, and it felt good to like talk to him and to thank him for being out there in the public, and also he was, you know, like my sponsor for the day. You know, listening to me drone on about some bullshit and telling me, go to a meeting and shut up, you know? And, you know, I've mentioned about my brother, you know, he was instrumental in me getting this podcast. He was instrumental in my career. Now, you know, now I'm calling games for ESPN. He was, thank you. He always moved me in that direction. Hey, you know, you have to take chances, but it's not going to be, you're going to have to hone your craft. It's going to take a while. Like that commitment, you know, and then we found out, so my brothers and I, both of them sober, Michael and Kevin, and we found out that Kevin was sick. He had cancer, and it came back in I guess May, right? So early May, it came back with a vengeance, and he ends up having a couple seizures. I mean, this healthy guy plays music. He's a therapist. He literally played this huge concert in Southern California in like the first week of May. And now it's May 21st, and he's in the hospital, and they're like, the melanoma is all over his brain.
Oh, no.
It's a Wednesday, so it's a Wednesday, but I'll take you back. It's a Wednesday morning, and we were planning on going out there to fly there to be with him because we knew it was crunch time. We didn't know it was the end of the line. We knew it was crunch time, and but we thought he could beat it. There was a chance there was different treatment they could do to try to zap it out with radiation. And my brother Mike called me on Wednesday morning. He's like, I don't even know how to tell you. He's like, because we always fuck around. He's like, I almost feel like you're going to think I'm joking, but I'm not. He's like, Kevin's going to die. Like, and he's going to die like today or tomorrow.
Really?
The first, I mean, I went home. I was in a daze. I started to feel this like underlying just like pain and tension. But the first place I went was to our meeting at noon. And, you know, I shared about it because I'd seen people go before me and do that. My father, when he died, the first place I went was our meeting. At that point, we were still at the church. We were meeting in that room. It was COVID.
Yeah.
And like, that's what you do. And like, it doesn't mean you go to a meeting and all your anguish or pain vanishes, but it certainly.
You're reminded you're not alone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other day I went up to a meeting and you were there. I was going through all this bullshit for work. And I felt like, whatever, I'm not being seen and then I went into the room with you guys and I was like, I'm just an alcoholic, and my primary purpose is to carry the message, right? And to help people. That's why I'm able to talk to you like this with such comfort, because just like anything else, I've done it before, and meetings and recovery has helped me. I see it in you when you talk about, you're convincing either way. But when you talk about sobriety, you're extremely convincing.
But it's easy when that's easy when you know that there's hope. You know that there's a solution.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, when you've been in the battle, it's easy to recollect.
Yeah. So, we went to California. My brother passed away. I was able to be there for him. We were able to eulogize him twice, a ceremony.
That was beautiful. I saw some of the video.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
Just amazing.
It was amazing. And to be able to, stand in front of a church or people on a beach and talk about him and relate it to sobriety, and to talk about how my brothers and I together just vibrated on a different level, because we had those relationships you just break through. Not only are we brothers, but we're sober. Right. So we have this incredible bond. It was a magical connection. I still have it with my brother Michael, and I feel like I still have it with Kevin. You do. So yeah, I mean, like, it's all good. Like, and I feel like Kevin's with me all the time. And, I know if there's one thing, and I'm happy I brought him up, because I thought about this right after he passed away. If there's one thing he would want me to do, it was stay sober and to carry the message. That's all he would want. That's all he would want. If to him, I had become a resounding success. When he realized that I had a pretty good program, and that I was not full of shit anymore, and, he was like, I was in with him, I was like, I had VIP
connection.
access. Yeah.
Brothers aside, that soul-to-soul connection.
And, so I don't know. I love you. I love being able to be here with you. Every time I see you, I think we have a mutual admiration for each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What a story.
Yeah.
How do you start your day every morning?
Okay, so I end up restarting my day a lot, because I wake up.
Yeah, like at 4:00 in the afternoon, you're like, "Good morning, good morning."
I wake up very early, because I do the morning show here.
For the longest,
So I'm up at 3 a.m. every morning.
Oh wow!
And so a lot of time, and this is like, it's to the point where it's problematic for me. And I talk to sponsors about it, and I'll start reading the big book in the morning, but I can never stick to it. And I think when it will change is when I'll probably get a different shift in life to start, because I get up at 3 o'clock and it's like, you're just running and gunning. Now I get to work, and I usually am able to start practicing the principles of sobriety there, because I'm interacting with other people.